Good evening, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Liam Halligan, standing in for Neil Oliver, who sends you all his greetings from Bonnie, Scotland. Tonight we're looking back on a tumultuous week of economics and politics. The pound went on a rollercoaster ride as the Tory faithful gathered for their annual party conference in Birmingham, the first with Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The government then U-turned, scrapping its plans to cut the top rate of tax from 45 to 40 pence. For the top 2% of earners amidst a political backlash. Hardly surprising during a cost of living crisis. I'll be joined this next hour by financial analyst extraordinaire Justin Urquhart-Stewart, GB News' very own answer to Gordon Gekko, and also Victoria Scholar of Interactive Investor, grown-up discussions with bags of personality. All that and more coming up after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 10 people have died, including a primary school girl, in an explosion at a service station in County Donegal in Ireland. 4 men, 3 women and 2 teenagers have also died. It's understood the petrol station was the hub of the tight-knit village of Creesler. Northern Ireland's Fire and Rescue Service crossed the border to assist with the search and rescue efforts. Emergency services are still helping with the recovery mission, having already worked through the night. Irish police believe the blast was an accident, but aren't ruling out other causes.
At this point in time, we have to keep an open mind as a police service and how we investigate this. But our information at this point in time is pointing towards a tragic accident. That said, being a Garda, I have to take a holistic and overall viewpoint, but that's where we're going at the moment.
Member of the House of Lords and former Deputy Leader of the DUP, Lord Nigel Dodds, has called the incident horrendous.
Every one of us can relate to calling into a filling station or wanting to call in and get some groceries or a snack or something, and to be caught up in something like this is just horrendous. And when you hear those who've died include men, women, teenagers, a young child, it really is awful. Our hearts and prayers are with the bereaved of those who have lost their lives, and obviously hope and pray that those that have been injured make a swift recovery.
In other news, the serial killer Peter Tobin has died after becoming unwell in prison. He was taken to hospital from HMP Edinburgh, where he was serving 3 life sentences for the rape and murder of Polish student Angelika Kluk and the murders of teenagers Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol in 1991. Their bodies were found buried in the garden of his former home in Margate in Kent 17 years later. Police questioned Tobin about other murders they believe he may have committed, but he refused to give any details. The UK has exported lamb to the United States for the first time since 1989. The Prime Minister has hailed the move a milestone after President Joe Biden lifted the decades-old ban on British meat imports in September last year. The market is worth an estimated £37 million in the first 5 years of trade. Celebrating the news on Twitter, Liz Truss said the move marks a well-deserved boost to our rural economy. Only around 1 in 5 trains are running today across Scotland, England and Wales. Members of the RMT union are staging their 8th strike this year in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The train operator's chief negotiator, Tim Shoveler, says passengers should only travel by train if absolutely necessary. RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch has warned of further strikes to come. A large explosion has seriously damaged the only road and rail bridge linking the occupied Crimean Peninsula to Russia. Russian authorities say 3 people have died in the blast on the Kerch Bridge, but it's not yet clear if it was a deliberate attack. Ukraine haven't claimed responsibility. The bridge, which is the longest in Europe, is crucial to supplying the peninsula and Russian forces across Ukraine. Moscow says the train line is now reopened and large queues of cars and buses have started crossing again. And thousands of people have formed a human chain around Parliament calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Mr Assange is currently being held in London's Belmarsh prison amid a legal battle to avoid extradition to the US, where he could face a prison sentence of up to 175 years. He's wanted in America over the leak of secret military information. Former PR advisor Richard Hillgrove says it's important for journalism that Assange is freed.
The fact that this is being led not so much from Don't Extradite Assange again, but the National Union of Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists, which has 600,000 members globally, leading this exercise means, the penny is dropping that this is not, this is political. This puts journalism in the firing line. If Assange goes down, journalism goes down.
TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Liam Halligan.
Liz Truss was in Birmingham this week for her first conference as Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister. She put on a brave face. My priorities are growth, growth and growth, Truss declared, channeling perhaps Tony Blair's education, education, education speech in 1997, his first as a Labour Prime Minister. The opponents of growth, the vested interests, the forces of decline are wrong, 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 Truss told the party faithful in a definite throwback to another Prime Minister's words. For it was in 1990, responding to Brussels' attempts further to dilute UK sovereignty, that Margaret Thatcher insisted no, no, no from the House of Commons dispatch box, as every true blue Conservative knows. Rather than the Iron Lady, though, Truss has come across as politically tin-eared after she and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng tried to lower the top 45% rate of additional income tax to 40%, a tax cut for the top 2% of earners only, those on more than £150 a year in the midst of an escalating cost of living crisis. Truss and Kwarteng were forced into a U-turn during their own conference, scrapping that move to a 40% top rate after Tory tax cuts were blamed for serious jitters on currency and debt markets, with the pound tumbling and government borrowing costs sharply up, a trend that rippled out across the economy, causing mortgage and pension panic. This new Prime Minister and her senior team, they're now desperate to make amends, to assert themselves and their pro-growth supply-side agenda on their party and the broader country, cutting back regulation and taxes in a bid to get the British economy moving. The reality is, though, that the trajectory of the economy, and with it not just the government's survival, but the prosperity of thousands of firms and millions of households across the UK, now depends largely on market and broader financial forces, which are way beyond any politician's control. Cast your mind back, if you're old enough, to the 2008 global financial crisis, a time when the entire world economy was upended due to the reckless activities of out-of-control investment banks, not least in the UK and US. Financiers in the city, on Wall Street and elsewhere, they borrowed billions to place huge bets on increasingly dubious investments, so complex almost no one understood them, knowing that governments, taxpayers would be forced to bail them out to avoid a full-scale banking collapse, with all the disastrous economic and political turmoil, to say nothing of the civic unrest that would cause. Such investment banks, having grown to a gargantuan size as regulators turned a blind eye, were too big to fail, don't you know? The sharp-suited bosses running them specialised in heads I win, tails you lose activity, the kind that gives capitalism a bad name. At the end of 2008 and into 2009, the financial crisis was so serious that merely cutting interest rates to reboot the global economy was deemed insufficient. The Bank of England, along with the Federal Reserve and other leading central banks, they launched a one-off programme called quantitative easing, or QE, creating money out of nothing, then injecting it into the financial system to avoid a disastrous banking collapse. But the UK's initial £50 billion QE rescue scheme, meant to last just a few months, it grew like Topsy. Central bank largesse, it juiced up share prices. It was used to buy government bonds, meaning the state could borrow more cheaply. Investment banks and successive governments, a powerful combination, they became addicted as QE morphed into the economic equivalent of crack cocaine. The emergency measures meant to be temporary from 2009, morphing into a lifestyle choice. By early 2020, the UK's QE programme had ballooned from 50 billion of money creation to 425 billion, 8 times the original plan. By pushing up share prices and shielding ministers from really tough spending decisions, QE has friends in high places. Perhaps that's why it's come under so little scrutiny, barely debated in Parliament, with almost the entire media taking it completely for granted. Yet by boosting stock and property prices, QE's made the asset-rich richer still, and housing even less affordable for countless ordinary families. And those related ultra-low interest rates, they've meanwhile punished tens of millions of savers. The reality is, though, that QE is deeply counterproductive. Hosing economies down with liquidity doesn't make them grow faster. That's a bit like trying to get fat by buying a bigger belt. QE's also skewed bank lending towards incumbent zombie companies, starving smaller dynamic firms of finance, the kind that really boosts growth. And many real-world investors, meanwhile, those growing businesses, rather than engaged in financial engineering, they've been so spooked by the monetary madness of recent years, they've kept serious money off the table, stymieing growth even more. And on top of all that, the more QE's been used to pump up financial markets, making shares and other assets artificially expensive, the harder it's become to stop the mass money printing without sparking another meltdown, with all the related economic and political carnage. And that's the huge danger, that years of grotesquely excessive QE have set us up for collapse. But if QE was excessive before COVID, it went into overdrive during the pandemic, for it was QE that largely paid for lockdown. As the government struggled to fund furlough and business support loans, the state issued IOUs like confetti, many bought up by the Bank of England. Our money printing programme duly expanded by another 450 billion to an astonishing 875 billion pounds in total. That's 6 times the annual NHS budget created out of thin air, with more QE happening during the year and a half of lockdown than during the whole of the previous decade. And now, as inflation has finally punched through, this QE-driven stock market, bond market, Ponzi scheme, it's starting to look quite shaky. Across the world, interest rates are rising, and that will continue as we retreat from the ultra-low levels which have prevailed since 2008. No politician, no central banker either can stop that happening. This is an inconvenient truth which no one wants to admit, certainly not the likes of the International Monetary Fund and the central bankers who oversaw QE. Better to blame the UK's recent financial turmoil on an incoming government, one led by a politically vulnerable Prime Minister with only lukewarm support from her own MPs. Now, don't get me wrong here. There was much to criticise in the government's mini-budget. To lower the top tax rates with a tough winter looming, with millions worrying how to make ends meet, was spectacularly bad timing. But the idea this unfunded tax cut crashed the pound is absurd. Lowering the top rate cost the state around £2 billion, a rounding error amongst almost 900 billion of government revenue. Lowering the top rate could even make the state money, given the impact on work incentives. That, though, is now the accepted political narrative, that a greed-driven Tory government drove down sterling while causing borrowing costs to spike, the higher borrowing costs rippling across the economy, damaging hard-working families and firms. And it's a narrative this Truss government will struggle to shake off, all because of a lack of political nous. But the broader truth is this. Our financiers and central bankers in cahoots with placid governments has created an almighty financial bubble, supported by mass money printing and ultra-low interest rates. And as we finally retreat from that, and the QE bubble-blowing machine is turned off, borrowing costs inevitably will rise as the cheap credit era comes to an end. This is not an easy message, but it's one we can hardly avoid. We are in for a period of painful adjustment, a truth our political and media class must urgently start to explain. So what do you think? How are rising interest rates impacting you and your family? And who do you blame for rates going up? The government, greedy investors, or are these rises inevitable as we retreat from years of ultra-low interest rates? Email me here at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GBNews. We'll read out some of your comments later in the show. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, you are an extremely experienced person when it comes to financial markets, as are you, Victoria Scholar. We've both had chats on GB News many, many times. Thank you so much for coming in early Saturday evening to join me here as we attempt, all of us in our way, to cover for the fantastic Neil Oliver. Justin, you and I have talked about QE a lot over the years. To what extent do you think what we're really seeing here is the end of an era rather than a response to a single mini-budget statement?
Well, it certainly feels like one, and probably deserves to be one. Because as you perfectly explained in that wonderful review of everything, QE was brought in to solve a particular issue, an emergency. And from that, and I remember when we finished that first 50 billion, turning around to some of the people saying, well, presumably we couldn't do that again, could we? Oh, no, we can't do that again, absolutely impossible. And
Yes.
there you described, it went on
We do
again.
it 8 times more.
Absolutely. And it became, we were addicted to this thing. And to the next generation coming through, particularly of those in the finance and politics of finance, actually say, well, it's magic money, it's fine, it works. Nothing's gone wrong with it, we'll carry on doing it. And no one thought about the end game. And those who sat there and thought about, eventually, this has to be paid for. And, of course, also, well, interest rates are low. No, as you said, they're ultra low. They've got to get back to real rates. And you talk to people now about actually getting back to real rates, they start sucking through their teeth and say, I can't afford that, because they've been used to the amount of rates pushed so low down. So this is a change.
Victoria Scholar, you're not here to talk about politics. You are very much into finance. You look at spreadsheets and yield curves and all the rest of it. But I know you do have a good sense of history from our previous discussions. Just put in historic context, Victoria, the last couple of weeks. It's been pretty financially turbulent, hasn't it? And it has followed that mini-budget statement on the 23rd of September.
Yeah, and I do think that the mini-budget statement does have something to do with it, given the sharp movement that we saw in the pound, which hit a record low on the Monday after the Friday when the announcement came out. And we also saw that dysfunction in the gilt market, which forced the Bank of England...
The market for government debt.
Government debt market,
Yeah.
exactly, that forced the Bank of England to step in with that emergency intervention to save some of the biggest pension funds, which were understood to be on the brink of collapse. But to put it into a broader picture, like you say, this is a shift away from ultra-low interest rates. And that's been the case since essentially the end of last year, when we got the revival of inflation post-pandemic. And the reason why they've been able to keep interest rates that low for that long is because we haven't been forced with a picture in which we're dealing with inflation. But now, post-COVID, it's reared its ugly head, and interest rates have no choice but to go up to try and curtail price levels and bring inflation, which is now almost at double digits, back down to the Bank of England's target, which is just 2%.
Of course, inflation, Justin, this is all about the cost of living. Inflation, as Victoria said, is currently 9.9%. It's come down a little bit, but it's still very, very high. Bank of England's target is 2%. Crikey. To what extent do you think, though, that mini-budget statement, just to slightly push back against Victoria at my peril, it was the spark, it was the catalyst rather than the cause of these big movements? I'm not here to, stand up for the Tories or Kwasi Kwarteng. I'm coming at this as a sort of economist, as an analyst, trying to explain to people at home who are worried about rising interest rates, worried about paying their bills, where this is actually coming from.
Yeah, the 45p rate cancellation was irrelevant. It makes for a headline. Tories get embarrassed because they've had to rein back on it.
Pretty inept, though, politically, the timing, right?
And it is that, and it's almost looking back at politicians trying to play. No, I'm Margaret Thatcher and I'm big and butch.
I've got the train set now. I'm going to learn it. They're only lowering it to it was 40% under Blair, and the whole of Blair Blair and most of Brown's government, the top rate of tax was 40% under Labour. So it's hardly a sort of extreme policy.
No, and also this idea that I've got to be big and determined and I've no turning. Well, hang on a second. Mrs. Thatcher did turn several times, because sometimes she actually realised, whoa, I'm going to wait here. I can't take on the miners now because I don't have enough coal. I've actually worked out that actually I'm going to...
Showing his age.
All this, well, it goes back that far, making sure that, the days of monetary policy needed to be changed round as well. She had to reverse on that one. But she's known for actually saying no, no, no. Well, she adjusted and changed. In the last few years, she forgot how to change, and actually that was probably her fall, dealing with the taxes then. But nonetheless, there's somehow the feeling that you have to be big and butch, and if I do be dynamic and I'm decisive, that actually all make it well. Well, markets don't work like that.
Our former Lib Dem Prime Minister perhaps a bit too keen to demonstrate her Thatcherite credentials.
Absolutely.
Has that cost us?
Yes, it has cost us. And there's one thing as well. Was one thing and maybe this is why you didn't call it. They didn't call it a budget. You do not, if you've got a financial statement, go and actually talk to all the banks and fund managers and things like that the night before. You're supposed to be in purdah. You keep quiet. And you talk to those people, including some of the short sellers, who have actually, Kwasi Kwarteng used to work, one of them.
He did.
And then, lo and behold, the following day, there are short sales done almost immediately. And you think, well, stone me. And obviously, that's probably why it's not a budget.
Hold that thought, Justin and Victoria. We will return to this after the break. We'll also be joined by an economist called Gerard Lyons, who is an extremely influential person these days. He advised Boris Johnson, and he's been whispering into Liz Truss's ear. We'll be looking at why interest rates are rising. Stay with us here on Neil Oliver Live.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness,
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 6:23. Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. I'm standing in for the great man, and I'm Liam Halligan. So since the Chancellor's mini-budget on the 23rd of September, the pound has fallen, but it's bounced back roughly to where it was before Kwasi Kwarteng's statement. Borrowing costs, though, remain somewhat higher on wholesale money markets, which, of course, set the benchmark for rates on mortgages and other personal and business loans, with the so-called 10-year gilt rate, trust me, up from around 3.8% before the mini-budget to around 4.2% now. Joining me now to discuss this is Chief Economic Strategist of Net Wealth, Dr. Gerard Lyons. He formerly advised Boris Johnson when he was London Mayor, and he's also recently been advising Liz Truss, particularly during that Tory leadership contest. Jerry, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us on your Saturday evening. To what extent do you think the mini-budget was to blame for this financial turmoil that we've seen and the seemingly inevitable U-turn on that 45% top rate of tax?
Well, good evening. It's great to be on the show, Liam. Just to clarify, I'm not advising anyone. I'm an outside economist, but I know that Liz Truss, before she became Prime Minister, asked a few outside economists, including myself, for our views. So important to stress that I'm not advising her. But in answer to your question, I think the mini budget was this sort of, I won't say the last straw that broke the camel's back, in the sense, as some people have said, I think, as you've touched on, it was a combination of factors. And therefore, it would be unfortunate to blame the mini budget solely, although that naturally contributed to the market turmoil. In fact, there were a combination of factors. The very febrile environment in the financial markets was not helped by a global backdrop where the American central bank was clearly set to raise interest rates, and that was making the dollar very strong across the board. Then on top of that, on the evening of the mini budget, the Bank of England raised rates by 0.5%, a significant amount. Not as much as some in the markets had hoped for, because on the Wednesday of that week, the Bank of England met on the Thursday. On the Wednesday of that week, the Americans had raised rates even more. So on the Thursday, the Bank of England raised rates significantly by not as much as the Americans. And then also on that same day, the Bank of England said that they would sell gilts, government stock, which added to the worries in the market because there was a lot of supply. And then on the Friday, we had the mini budget, where the Chancellor not only announced what the market had already expected, the energy levy being set, and reversing two big tax increases, national insurance and corporation tax, but then he went that little bit further. So really, in answer to your question, it was a combination of three factors. The global environment set by the Americans, second, the actions of the Bank of England, but thirdly, the mini budget, and then over the weekend, the Chancellor doubling down to very much defend what he had done in the mini budget. I think market interest rates would have increased anyway, even if we had not had a mini budget, but that certainly added to the tough environment we've seen in recent weeks.
Jerry, you're a PhD economist. You've been shortlisted in the past to be governor of the Bank of England. You really are somebody across a lot of the technical detail here, but having known you a long time, I know you're also a very astute student of politics. Do you think the Liz Truss government can ever actually shake off this sense that, as Keir Starmer said, they crashed the pound, they pushed up your mortgage costs?
Well, I think one way to look at it is this, that there were three key target groups for the Chancellor and for the government. And they really covered two of those three target groups, but not the third. The target groups were the general public, and they addressed them through the energy levy, unnerved the general public, as we've seen from opinion polls. The second target group was British business. And what was interesting to note was the three big business groups, the Confederation of British Industry, Institute of Directors, and Federation of Small Businesses, who don't always agree, has to be said. All three groups were very positive and constructive about the policy environment and the mini budget. But it was the third group, the financial markets. Financial markets were already in the febrile state, and they were already worried about the direction of global, including UK interest rates. So it was that third group that was very much unnerved. And because of how the markets have reacted, that's unnerved the general public as well. So what does the government need to do from here? I wrote an article in the Financial Times today saying very much that the Chancellor needs to focus on stabilising the markets. Therefore, it's very important and right that he's brought forward the announcement of his medium-term fiscal statement. Now, this coming weekend, or next weekend, I should say, the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England are both heading off to the IMF meetings in Washington. These are the big annual meetings. And I think it's important that he again reiterates the message he gave last week in a very good statement, actually, at the Conservative Party conference. At the Conservative Party conference, the Chancellor very much was trying to allay fears about fiscal and financial prudence and discipline. So in answer to your question, I think it's very much about stabilising the situation, appealing to the financial markets, addressing their fears, stabilising that, and then very much providing some context to the general public. But with interest rates heading higher, here and globally, it's going to be a difficult backdrop nonetheless, whatever the government says.
Dr. Jerry Lyons, Chief Economic Strategist of Net Wealth, economist extraordinaire. Great to have you with me here on GB News. Thanks a lot for taking some out of your Saturday evening to join us. Now, Gerard Lyons there. He mentioned Kwasi Kwarteng's speech at the Tory party conference. I was there. And for GB News, I managed to succeed, as it happens, the only sit-down interview with the Chancellor. I'm just going to bring you just a little bit of that now. I asked Kwasi Kwarteng whether he was surprised by the quite dramatic market impact of his mini-budget. Take a look. No Chancellor, no Prime Minister, especially when they're incoming, mid-term, if you like, wants to see a market reaction that dramatic. What could you have done differently in retrospect?
Well, I think there were things, it was a very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini-budget. It was a high-speed, high-pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better. But what you've got to remember is that 5 weeks ago, we were in the middle of an energy crisis. And the energy intervention actually was the most significant thing that we did as part of the mini-budget. That was the bit that I think we showed real leadership about an energy crisis where people were facing £6,500 potentially in their bills next year. And we intervened.
Kwasi Kwarteng there stressing that his mini-budget was really about that energy price cap. Though no, that's not part that the press picked up on, or indeed the financial markets. Joining me now, going back to my panel, Justin Urquhart-Stewart, Victoria Scholar. Just a little bit of inside leg info on that interview. It was quite interesting. In the middle of that interview, the security services came in and said we had to stop the interview, and I said, but that's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. No, we need this room, because we were on a building site outside Birmingham. We were at a building site in Selly Oak, and I must say, throughout all of that, a lot of senior politicians, they totally lose it completely, those under a lot of pressure, and Kwasi Kwarteng, it's fine, no problem. so that was quite interesting. But Victoria, he was putting on a defence there. He said the measures were bold, and now he said scrapped the 45% to 40% top rate of tax. What do you think is going to happen on the financial markets next week?
Well, it's interesting, actually, because we're already seeing the pound move lower again. You know, we
about $1.11 at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, we had that big decline after the mini-budget and then quite a swift reversal. But we've actually seen the pound shift lower again. And this goes to your point that it is actually factors beyond the mini-budget that do actually affect markets as well. Because on Friday in the United States, we had a strong jobs report, and that supports the idea that the Federal Reserve needs to...
US Central Bank, yeah.
The US Central Bank needs to move more aggressively to combat its own inflation. And that puts upward pressure on the dollar, and it puts downward pressure on other currencies, including the pound. So some of the pound's weakness that are coming through at the moment is actually also to do with broader global factors. And, you know, we're grappling with inflation and the cost of living crisis, but it is also very much a global issue. We're by no means the only economy to be struggling with rising price levels.
It's worth saying, Justin, UK inflation, even at 9.9%, as Victoria pointed out, it's below the Eurozone average. We thought the UK was going to go into recession. It hasn't so far, according to revised figures from the Office for National Statistics that have recently come out. And the UK's debt as a share of national income, government debt, is actually the second lowest in the G7. Only the ultra-prudent Germans are lower than us. And yet, as Victoria points out, the pound is falling, the dollar's going up, and that falling pound, it's not just about if you're going to Florida to Disney World, you know, at the exchange markets, you're, oh my God, I've only got this many dollars. If the pound falls, that leads to more inflation because our imports become more expensive. And that's why it's an important part of this policy-making conundrum.
You would think the points you just made there, they're all strong points as to why actually the UK economy should actually have a bit more support. But despite that, there was still weakness. And the reason is primarily, I think, just in terms of overall confidence. We wanted to have someone who's going to give us stability, show stability. Yes, we're going to have some interesting changes and moves, but don't worry, this is a strong, steady hand And actually, I'm afraid all we got was people trying to be dynamic, probably trying to show off a little bit too much. And the result is, I'm afraid, the markets just didn't believe.
I'll tell you what I thought happened. I mean, the markets in Asia, they could see that the British press was going to go nuts over this 45 to 40% tax cut, because it was just politically inept and ill-timed. So in quiet moments throughout the 24-hour cycle, because currency markets are always open, they're not like shares, currency markets are always open, they thought, I'll tell you what, if we get a lot of money short of the pound, if you like, trying to push the pound down, then you're going to get a doom loop, aren't you? The pound goes down, the papers go even more crazy in the UK, the pound go down some more, and the people who have shorted the pound, bet against it, making money from its fall, make even more money. I mean, am I overanalyzing this, Victoria?
I think, sort of to the point that we were discussing just before, confidence is such a massive issue. We know
but that's driven by the press.
It is, and you know, we know that consumer confidence is at a record low with the cost of living crisis. Yes, the headlines certainly don't help with sort of the doom-mongering. And yeah, I mean, this is the thing with financial markets, is that they are driven by sentiment.
Fear and greed.
Fear and greed. So when we see a sell-off, actually what we typically see in markets is we see very sharp moves lower, because that's prompted by fear.
And emotion.
Emotion. And then we sort of see slow grinds higher. So that sort of move down.
The kind of saw edge that you see in financial markets.
Exactly. So we do see those very quick moves to the downside, and that's because there's a lot of human emotion involved in financial markets.
Well, it'd be interesting to see, wouldn't it, in the next few weeks, when we start hearing some comments from some of the market participants, how many actually did sell short and then buy back 12 hours later and actually just really made some advance on it.
It's like people who watch the Beatles at the Cavern Club. They all say that they did, but did they actually?
We'll find out eventually.
We certainly will. Hold that thought, and we will come back for some more, because after the break, we'll also be bringing in the Sunday Express political editor, David Williamson, asking whether Liz Truss's government can recover in terms of its reputation. Stay with us here on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
To go.
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back. It's 6:38. I'm Liam Halligan, standing in for Neil Oliver. Now, this was obviously a pretty testing first Conservative conference as Prime Minister for Liz Truss. I have to say, I was at Labour's conference in Liverpool the week before, and the atmosphere was pretty different. There was more discipline. There was relatively strong party management. There was a sense to me that the Labour rank and file sensed that power could be in the offing, so they're on their best behaviour. But what are tomorrow's Sunday papers likely to say about Liz Truss at the end of a tough week? Join me now on Neil Oliver Live is David Williamson. He's political editor of the Sunday Express. David, great to have you with us. What's the mood across what we used to call Fleet Street? Is she going to survive?
Oh, well, it's great to be with you, Liam, on this lovely evening. Thanks very much indeed. I think she is going to absolutely give the fight of her life. I mean, there's one thing that you can say about Liz Truss. It's that people underestimate her at her peril. She has been in the cabinet for such a sustained period of time, doing some of the biggest jobs in government. And she, it's fair to say, has had sniping throughout her career of people who have tried to patronise her at every turn. She is now just a few weeks into one of the biggest jobs on the planet. And I think any suggestion that she's going to bow to her critics or tone down her plans at the moment is throwing away the history of what we've seen. She did want to come in with a big bang, and she unveiled policies that perhaps had bigger blowback and bigger reverberations. This is one of those sort of Italian job moments when more than the doors were blown off. However, she has a team around her at the minute who, the big difference between, say, the end of John Major's government and now is that then you did have a feeling that most of the personalities were exhausted. They'd been sitting around that cabinet table for what seemed like generations. The difference is, and I'm sure you found this when you walked around Birmingham, everywhere you look, there are young people, many in their first ministerial jobs, lots of people in their first jobs in government as an advisor or as a PPS. And for them, this is the chance that they've been waiting for all through their school days, university, those long days in think tanks. They want to change the world. And it's really nothing less than that. And many politicians, especially in the 1990s and the noughties, you felt that a lot of them were wishing that they sort of had a bigger challenge, that it wasn't just a case of management. Well, wow, they have the challenge that they will define their lives. They're trying to control inflation. They have a mad dictator invading another country. This is something which, if they can get through this, if they can pull it off, and if, despite what the polls are saying, they can hang on to a majority in 2 years' time, this will be the stuff that screenplays will be written about.
I do agree with you, David. Walking around Birmingham, as I said earlier, I spent some time with the Chancellor. I talked to the Prime Minister. I talked to other cabinet ministers. There was a sense of, you know, they were trying not to come across as ruffled. I'm wondering if that's because they are deluded or because they're statesmanlike. I haven't quite made up my mind. The other thing I noticed, David, as I'm sure you did, there were lots of young people, absolutely. There were lots of younger MPs, the 2017 and above all the 2019 intake of MPs, particularly from those Red Wall constituencies. But there weren't really that many other MPs. Some of them might use the excuse of the train strike, of course. The RMT Rail Union conveniently put the latest train strike, apart from today, on the Wednesday, the day of the Prime Minister's speech. So a lot of MPs didn't stick around for that. But in general, there weren't that many MPs. As a political editor of one of Britain's great newspapers, are you sensing ferment and rebellion once more on those Conservative backbenches?
There definitely is a section of the party that is grievously unhappy with what's going on, who don't see themselves as libertarians, and who look at the type of economists who are influencing Liz Truss with something bordering dismay. Now, the question is, are they actually going to win the day? One of the problems with having had a relatively weak opposition for a long time is that parties in government can start to look at other members of their own party as the real opposition. Now, there is nothing, however, like some shocking poll ratings to focus the mind. And also, I think we saw in Liz Truss's speech how It was the disturbance by the Greenpeace protesters which actually transformed what had been quite a tense room and a real sense of it was going okay, but not anything stellar. Whenever those protesters got up, suddenly the hall was united and people shouting them down. And you could see Liz Truss realising that, wow, everyone, no matter what faction they were from, was suddenly cheering her on, willing her to succeed. And then it was as if there was an adrenaline bolt in her herself. And we saw a smile, which is interesting. We used to see it a lot. And sometimes you don't realise you haven't seen something for a long time until it suddenly returns. But the smile that was so familiar when she was Foreign Secretary, when she was especially International Trade Secretary and jet setting, suddenly it was as if she had her mojo back, to use that cliche, and was ready to take on all comers. And I think that's what we're going to see in the coming weeks. However, that's not to underplay the enormity of the challenge she faces in uniting her own party. Because one of the key questions is, where on earth did the spending cuts come from? And we're already seeing huge dissension on the question of whether benefits should be upraised by inflation, as Boris had indicated would happen, or by earnings. Now, it is not just left-leaning think tanks that are horrified by this. We can see lots of people who are saying, at the end of the day, we have just won seats in the red wall. Our voters do not vote for us because they are impassioned about a small state vision. They are impassioned about us because, well, they offered the best vision for how public services could be financed, and they didn't trust Jeremy Corbyn to do that. So how she gets people behind that, how she can find savings that don't result in rebellions at every single turn, that is going to require every ounce of her diplomacy, and her whip's office are going to have to be working overtime.
David Williamson, a masterclass in political analysis and a dash of fun as well. Great to have you here on GB News. David Williamson, political editor of the Sunday Express. I completely agree with David that the best moment of Liz Truss's speech was when she was busking, when she was off script, when she was responding to the environmental protesters who were in the conference hall, who put up their poster, their banner, and then were bundled out. Something else that happened in the conference hall during the Conservative Party conference is that I was invited up on stage to interview Kemi Badenoch, no less, who is the Trade Secretary. She was one of the standout stars of that Tory leadership contest. She's only been in the House of Commons since 2017. She's already being talked about as a future Prime Minister. And when I talked to Kemi Badenoch, I wanted to bring you just this clip. I asked her how her politics had been influenced by the fact that she grew up in Africa.
Growing up in Nigeria meant that I had experiences that can't be taken away by poor arguments. So I was born into a relatively wealthy family, but we lost all our money. So people are often confused when I talk about growing up in poverty, but I experienced both, which means I'm terrified of inflation, because inflation wiped away everything that my...
And you understand financial insecurity.
Exactly.
In the way a lot of people in our political class and our media class don't.
Precisely. So it's informed a lot of my economic views, my views on authoritarianism. I grew up under a military government, so loving freedom and being free to be able to do things and think for yourself is really, really important.
Kemi Badenoch MP for the constituency of Saffron Walden in North Essex, and the Trade Secretary talking to me on the main conference stage at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham earlier this week. Justin, do you think she can survive politically? Do you think she could be the Lady Jane Grey of British politics and be out very soon?
Actually, it's quite astonishing. What she's done has been very controversial. However, if she is able to now come back and say stability, have that stability, then actually she'll get further support. So all is not gone yet.
Victoria, what is the economic outlook over the next few months? Because it's absolutely vital. It is going to make or break this government.
Well, I'd say it's pretty dismal. You know, consumer confidence is at a record low. We've got sky-high inflation, which is essentially another word for the cost of living crisis. We've managed to stave off a recession thus far, but the Bank of England is forecasting that we head into a prolonged economic slowdown that's going to start in the final quarter of this year, so this quarter now, and endure for the whole of 2023. So that's going to mean less spending, less jobs, lower wages in real terms, and less tax receipts, unfortunately, for the government as well.
But the UK economy, we're still attracting a lot of inward investment. There's still a lot of really good companies out there who are investing, who are innovating. Unemployment is still pretty low, Justin. One fly in the ointment, though, we must mention, it almost got lost in the tsunami of news this week, was that OPEC meeting in Vienna, the energy exporters cartel. They're showing no quarter. They want to limit supplies of oil on global markets. They want the oil price to be pushed up.
Yep. Now, as far as they're concerned, they've been in the market the past few years where they've actually had to support things. And supporting the Americans and the Saudis don't feel necessarily why they have to keep on supporting the Americans now. Maybe it's a bit of a turnaround, push back on that one. No. What we need to know is quite right. Focus on the strengths of the UK economy, those smaller companies, those high-tech companies, and they are all over the country.
We're good at this stuff, right?
Yeah, focus on that. Find ways of actually making sure the capital gets drawn towards them. That's one of the best ways you can actually make sure the Red Wall gets support.
And if we can deal with monetary policy, unwinding that QE monster I was talking about at the top of the show, if we can do it in a contained, civilised, understandable, gentle way, then maybe we can steer over-bloated, bubble-ridden financial markets out of this crisis.
Very difficult to actually get bubbles to actually just release air.
That's
they can go bang. But remember, we've got over a year, so by the time we get to the end of next year, maybe we've got signs of some recovery. So they start going into the next election with things not being perfect, but actually better than they were.
Stay with us, because after the break, I'll be joined by Maggie Foster. She's become a TikTok star by mimicking the mannerisms of our leading politicians, including someone called Liz Truss. You won't want to miss it. Stay with us.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 6:52. This is Liam Halligan here on GB News, standing in for Neil Oliver, who sends his greetings from Bonnie, Scotland. Now, does Liz Truss have an image problem? Some say our new Prime Minister's a little bit wooden and she needs to loosen up, show a more human side. Others wonder where her accent's from, given that she grew up in Leeds, Paisley, Oxford and Canada. One person who studied the new Prime Minister's voice closely, and that of many of our leading politicians, is the actor and TikTok star Maggie Foster. And here she is, miming to a speech Liz Truss once gave about British apples and, wait for it, pork markets.
I am infatuated with British food. We have never had it so good. We are growing wheat more competitively than the Canadian prairies. We're producing more varieties of cheese than the French. And we are selling tea to China. Yorkshire tea. In December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets. At the moment, we import 2/3 of all of our apples. That is a disgrace. I want our children to grow up knowing the taste of a British apple. And I will not rest until the British apple is back at the top of the tree.
Well, I have to say, in the GB News First, I'm delighted to be joined here in the studio by none other than Maggie Foster. Maggie, we're belly laughing here. This started for you during lockdown, didn't it? You got interested in looking at politicians, how they speak. You do an amazing Priti Patel. Your Caroline Flint is astonishing. Your Emily Thornberry, really, really incredible. What's it like mimicking Liz Truss? What were you trying to pick up on when you watched her, listened to her, in order to... It's only funny because there are flashes of familiarity. Obviously, it's a pastiche. But what was it that you looked for in Liz Truss?
Well, it's actually quite funny because when I was doing the TikToks, I tried to not really actually watch them, like their mannerisms. So I wanted to like bring a character out from what I sort of listened to. But I just think that like politicians in themselves are like quite awkward, and what they say and like. She, like, in that whole conference speech, she just paused so much. It was so awkward. She's actually really lovely. I've met her once before, and she's actually really, really sweet. But it was just an awkward, like, moment. I was just like, it's quite funny. And everything she just said, she was just like... And so I just wanted to, like, create... And she was talking about food, and I was like, she's definitely, like, a chef. So let's, like, throw an apron on and, yeah, create some pork markets. Yeah.
I've met her a few times as well in my sort of... As a journalist, it's my job to, particularly when she was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I'm mainly an economic journalist, and it was really important that I got to talk to her. I actually think she's better in small groups. Watching that conference speech, she was good when she threw the script away and was just responding. In the leadership contest, when she was on TV, she got off the script. Then I thought her real personality came through, but she's never going to live down that pork market speech, is she? And you know, her obsession with cheese.
I know, exactly. More cheese than the French. Yeah, no, I thought that her conference, she was much more confident. I think she, like, you can definitely see like a change in like her confidence and things like that. But I think she did well. I mean, yeah, obviously she hasn't got to the best start, but I've got faith in Liz. So yeah.
Victoria, as a woman, you're not here to talk politics, but as a human being, as a citizen, do you warm to her? I mean, you've got to admire her ambition, right?
Yeah, I think you have a point in the fact that I don't think she's the best showwoman, is she? She seems a bit rigid up there when she's giving political speeches. But obviously she's extremely intelligent and very ambitious to have got to where she's got to. I think maybe she just needs to somehow let some of her personality shine through, because I think the same is the case actually with Ed Miliband, because I've listened to his
The former Labour leader, of course, yeah.
And he has a fantastic personality when you listen to him when he's chatting with a friend, you know, in a kind of a casual podcast format. But then when he was the leader of the Labour Party, he wasn't really seen as a charismatic leader.
I think Gordon Brown was like that, going to a former Labour leader. Amazing in small groups, almost electric, sort of one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-three. But as soon as the TV cameras came out, sort of deer in the headlights. You've got to be able to do it on telly, right, if you want to be a politician.
Yeah, and they often have their sort of agenda that they have to get through in an interview, and they sort of almost ignore the questions and say what they need to say.
Like a robot, yeah.
But I think the general public have caught onto that now a bit, and they're not as sort of stupid or a bit more insightful than maybe they're given credit for.
Justin, briefly showing our age, we'll remember when Mrs Thatcher came to the fore, emerged as Tory leader in the mid-70s and then indeed as Prime Minister. She was pretty awkward at the beginning, wasn't she?
She was absolutely dreadful.
As my mum would say, as awkward as two left shoes.
I mean, she was awkward. She was coming out as being so crass, and particularly when you dealt with all the old Tories. And, of course, they were very happy to take the mickey out of her. But actually, then as soon as you realised, actually, they had to sort of quickly, someone got hold of her and said, right, well, stop, change this, change the clothes, change the style. And, you know, she warmed into it. But mind you, even old Blair, I remember him, he was actually being taught by Mandelson. When he come out of the house, you look up there at the third floor of the building, even though there isn't a building there, because that's your best sight.
Yeah.
And he would do it every time.
Just wave to nothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The theatre of politics. Right. You know all about the theatre of politics. Your TikToks have had incredible numbers. It's shot you to a fame of sorts. Are you going to carry on doing them?
Meghan Markle.
They're so brilliantly produced.
Well, actually, I was just about to say, like...
Meghan Markle with the little violin. And
I love the
Someone
violin.
said to me it should be smaller. The violin should be much smaller. But yeah, I think with what we're talking about with sort of presence with politicians speaking, I think like celebrities like Meghan Markle, when you hear her talk, it's very rehearsed.
Yes.
And it's very, very different from politicians. And I think that, I don't know if they get media training or whatever, but I think that's why they're a bit more awkward, politicians, because I don't think they're as trained as like an actress or XYZ. So,
but then those sort of Americanisms don't quite translate to the UK.
Yeah,
It almost goes the other way, a bit too polished.
It is too polished, and that's why she comes across sometimes quite fake.
And she's out of government for now, but I'm sure she'll come back. Why do you portray Priti Patel with a cigarette and a bottle of gin?
Well, actually, first of all, she did actually work for Diageo, which is an alcohol brand. So she did actually work, and that's why the bottles change, and I get different Diageo brands on every bottle. But also because I was listening to it, and she does this, like these massive inhales, like, I'm like, she's definitely having a cigarette. Like, so then I was like, just put her in some trackies. She's like a teenage girl drinking. She's basically me.
Sounds like phone calls home from university. You smoking again? No, Mum.
But yeah, no, that's why she was a teenager. But I'm sure she was pretty drunk all the time.
Well, Maggie Foster, fabulous to have you here. We are all huge fans of your amazing little films. Keep them coming.
Thank you.
Because certainly the nation needs cheering up at the moment. So great to have you on.
Very much,
and thank you to Victoria Scholar for being with us as well for this hour. And Justin Urquhart-Stewart is going to stay with us. It is 7 o'clock. I'm Liam Halligan on TV, online and DA Bus Digital Radio. This is GB News. And in a few minutes here on Neil Oliver Live, Neil says hi from Stirling, I'll speak to the people who are climbing Ben Nevis, Scaffold Pike and Snowdon this weekend to raise money for a two-year-old disabled child. We look at what could be a major breakthrough also in the treatment of people with motor neurone disease. And we'll hear from the new chef of one of Scotland's largest and most ancient clans. Neil, where are you? We need you. You're watching GB News and I'm Liam Halligan, standing in for Neil Oliver. Time now for the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Liam, thank you. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Taoiseach Micheál Martin has visited the scene of the petrol station explosion in County Donegal in Ireland. Yesterday's blast killed 10 people, including 2 teenagers and a primary school girl. Police in Ireland have said the search operation has now ended. The Garda will continue its investigation. Northern Ireland's Fire and Rescue Service had crossed the border into the village of Creesla to assist with the rescue efforts. Former Deputy Leader of the DUP, Lord Nigel Dodds, has called the incident horrendous.
Every one of us can relate to calling into a filling station or wanting to call in and get some groceries or a snack or something, and to be caught up in something like this is just horrendous. And when you hear those who've died include men, women, teenagers, a young child, it really is awful. Our hearts and prayers are with the bereaved of those who have lost their lives, and obviously hope and pray that those that have been injured make a swift recovery.
The Minister for Trade Policy has said he's looking forward to clearing his name following allegations of inappropriate behaviour made against him. Conor Burns was sacked from the government after a complaint of serious misconduct last week. He's reiterated he'll cooperate fully with the investigation and that he's committed to public services.
The last 24 hours have been distressing and devastating. I've still not had any information from the party of the nature of the complaint. I say, as I said in my statement, that I will cooperate fully with the party when they engage with me, and I look forward to clearing my name. I can't say anything more, I'm sorry, at this time.
Serial killer Peter Tobin has died at the age of 76 after becoming unwell in prison. He was taken to hospital from HMP Edinburgh, where he was serving 3 life sentences for the rape and murder of Polish student Angelika Kluk and the murders of teenagers Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol in 1991. Detectives questioned Tobin on his deathbed about other murders they believe he may have committed, but he refused to give any details. A large explosion has seriously damaged the only road and rail bridge linking the occupied Crimean Peninsula to Russia. Russian authorities say 3 people have died in the blast on the Kerch Bridge, which is crucial to supplying the peninsula and Russian forces across Ukraine. Moscow says the train line has now reopened. It's not yet clear if it was a deliberate attack by Ukraine. And only around 1 in 5 trains have been running today across Scotland, England and Wales. Members of the RMT union are staging their 8th strike this year in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Tomorrow, around half of the UK rail network will be closed, and those trains that are running will only operate from 7:30 in the morning until 6:30 in the evening. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver live with Liam Halligan.
Downstairs.
And welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining me here on GB News. Now, one of the most popular features of Neil Oliver's show each week is Great Britons, where a spotlight is shone on ordinary people doing extraordinary things. When Frankie Ray Tupney Hockney was just 3 months old, she was diagnosed with an exceptionally rare disorder, one of just 21 people with microdeletion syndrome caused by the absence of part of a chromosome. Frankie Ray's family were told she may never walk. However, little Frankie Ray, she's a fighter. She hails from Kidlington in Oxfordshire. She is beating the odds. Her story and her walking challenge for charity was featured on this channel in June and has since inspired others to join in and raise funds. Now, Frankie Ray's mum, Mary Ella, and dad, Ben, join me now, along with fundraiser Vincent Mccluskey, who this weekend is climbing Ben Nevis, Snowdonia and the 3 Peaks for the course. Here in the studio, let's talk to Frankie Ray's mum and dad. Ben, what a lovely little girl. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Really good to see you.
Hi, baby.
Just tell us how much mobility Frankie Ray actually has, despite that warning from doctors that she may never walk.
She has hypermobility, so that puts quite a lot of pressure on her joints. So from quite a young age, we never thought she'd even crawl, but she's defeated the odds and she's managed to do that. And with constant physio, she's managed to take a few steps as well. She's had a walking frame, and she's just inspired us all and actually done what we never thought would be possible. She's taken quite a few steps, haven't you, darling?
You must be so proud of her, Mariella.
I'm extremely proud. We've put in a lot of hard work with her as a family. All the teams that are involved with her, physios, OTs, they've all been amazing, and it just shows in how much she's come on. I didn't expect her to be walking. This time last year, I thought that was it, you know.
We can see some wonderful pictures there of Frankie Ray with her walker there. God, with a little tutu on as well. That's you, look. That's you.
She was off to baby ballet at that point. She loves music, and she loves to just stand there and sway from side to side.
This is a very rare condition.
Yeah.
and yet she's battling through and confounding the odds.
She definitely is. She's very determined. Very determined in everything that she tries to do. She'll always try to open something before she'll give it to one of us to do. She always wants to do something for herself, which I think has helped her in the long run in being able to actually take those steps. They're very wobbly. These were the most on the video there. They're the most steps that she's kind of taken. But
wow, steps there with no walker at all. Though for people listening on radio, Frankie Ray has some braces. They're around her shins rather than her knees, but they don't look restrictive. They don't look too uncomfortable.
No.
They're to stop the ankle from rolling to support her.
Indeed.
Yeah, they're wonderful creations, aren't they?
Yeah, they're amazing.
And many people watching and listening on GB News Radio will be thinking, how has this impacted you as a family? There's clearly a huge amount of love in this room from among your family, but it is challenging, isn't it?
Very challenging.
Dealing with a child with a rare condition, albeit, you know, even a child who's showing as much resilience and fight as Frankie Ray.
I think with social media as well, it's so easy to portray Frankie Ray as being such a happy little girl, and she is sort of 70% of the time, but that other 30% every day is a struggle, and she can have huge meltdowns because of the syndrome, because she can't talk, so she's unable to communicate properly with us, and she will have huge meltdowns, headbutt, pull her hair, pull my hair. But on the whole, she's a lovely little girl, and she's just such
and a beautiful
ray
smile.
Of sunshine.
And Frankie Ray's elder sister's with us. You must be very proud of your sister. What's your name?
Georgie Ellen.
Oh, Georgie Ellen.
Yeah, she's.
Isn't it fantastic? Your sister's learning to walk. Do you help her?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
She also likes to dance with her as well.
Yeah, she walks on her own sometimes, and you like to dance, don't you? Hold her hands.
So what's the prognosis here? Obviously, she's making huge progress. Those pictures are hugely inspiring that we've seen. Can we expect Frankie Ray to go further? Do you think she'll always need to have help with her mobility?
Yeah, I think going forward at the moment, they're not expecting her to come out of the splints anytime soon.
Right.
She will still need to use the walking frame if we're going on longer walk journeys. It's not like we can just sort of take her to the shop and walk around the shop at the moment. But hopefully, in time...
we just never know.
You know, and also with her her speech as well, she can make some sounds, but she is doing 15 single signs now. So, and she's able to tell us what she wants just by signing.
Fabulous.
And that's taken quite a lot of hard work.
But what a joy to unlock what she's thinking.
Yeah, definitely. She can understand everything that we say to her. She's just not able to.
She's clearly very alert.
Backwards.
And you've been raising money for charity. Lots of people have been helping you raising money for charity. How does it feel that people are, you know, walking the tallest 3 peaks in the UK
we are
in succession in order to raise money?
So incredibly grateful to them. We honestly can't thank them enough. What they've raised so far is going to enable us to be able to get a car seat for Frankie Ray that has to be made for her. So, yeah, we're hoping that going forward, that car seat's going to make a massive difference to us. And we'd like to be able to maybe get some cognitive brain therapy for Frankie Ray. So, and that may induce some of the global development delay to sort of widen the gap with that, which would be amazing.
So these charitable donations and indeed sponsorship money raised by people making an effort for you, that money really does make a difference to your lives. It makes a difference to Frankie Ray's life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
A huge difference.
It could potentially be life-changing for us.
I mean, like with the cognitive brain therapy, we don't know until we try it, but it is quite expensive to do, and if it does work, then that's just amazing for us.
Well, let's bring in now fundraiser Vince Mccluskey, who this weekend is climbing Ben Nevis, Snowdon and the 3 Peaks for this cause, helping kids like Frankie Ray. Vincent, what a fantastic thing to do. You're there with some of your colleagues. I think you're in Warrington, aren't you, down on your way to Snowdon?
Yes, we've just called in for a little bike ride, a quick break.
And how's the weather? It's getting a bit colder, isn't it? Are you going to make it? You're going to be able to do all those summits?
We'll just keep pushing on. When you see how Frankie Ray pushes on, the cold weather's not going to stop us. We're determined to complete it for Frankie Ray.
Oh, bless him.
And Carol Ann, why have you decided to choose this particular charity to help?
I think when you hear Frankie Ray's story and see what she's overcome so far, it's just really important. It's really important to raise awareness of a condition, and it's really important just to raise money to make her life better.
And Michael, you're putting in a huge shift here. It's a pretty tough gig that you've given yourself to climb Ben Nevis up in Scotland, the 3 peaks, and then the highest peak in Wales as well.
Yeah. It's worth it though. As Carol Ann's just said, you know, to raise awareness, but to raise the funds as well. And we're having a laugh on the way as well. You know, we've been through snow, sleet, rain, sunshine. We've had every season so far. So bring on Snowdon. Let's see what happens here.
You have got a GoFundMe page, haven't you, supporting your efforts. Do you want to tell us what it is?
Hiking for Success.
Yeah, Hiking for Success.
For
Ray, yes.
And do you know how many miles in total you're doing on this odyssey, this epic voyage? I mean, Britain isn't a particularly mountainous part of the world, but I've hiked those peaks that you're scaling this weekend, and it puts a taste in your mouth.
I think it's approximately 50 miles, yeah. The long one is the Yorkshire 3 Peaks, which is more of a walk than a climb from what we've experienced so far.
Mariella, back in the studio, how do you feel when you see ordinary people there putting their shoulder to the mill, using their time and money and energy to do something amazing for your kid?
Yeah, so honoured for them to be doing it, and just watching them, just then Ben and I both had a tear in our eye because we weren't expecting that.
It's absolutely inspiring what our friends and people are willing to do.
And their friends
for our
doing.
girl.
You know, we've never actually met Michael or Carol Ann ourselves, and yet they're joining Vincent on that journey and doing that for Frankie Ray. So
We're ever so grateful.
yeah, it's amazing.
There's a lot of doom and gloom around at the moment, isn't there? But there are good people out there.
Wonderful.
I mean, in some ways, obviously, you know, Frankie Ray, you wouldn't have it any other way. She's beautiful and she's your child and you'll do everything for her.
Absolutely.
But it is a challenge, and yet challenges like this can be life-affirming, right? Particularly when complete strangers come out of the woodwork and say, we're going to put our arms around you, you're not going to meet us, but we're going to do something that helps you just because we want to help you.
Honestly, if my arms could grow, I'd give them all a hug.
Yeah, like we've said, we're just so grateful for it.
Yeah.
And we're so grateful to all of you for coming in. Mariella, Ben, Georgia. Georgie Ellen, look after your little sister. I'm sure you will. And indeed, Frankie Ray, Tupney, Hockney, and the incredible mountaineering team scaling the heights of the UK, Vincent Mccluskey and Michael and Carol Ann. Thank you so much for joining us. What a wonderful story that tells us so much about human nature and about the UK. After the break, we'll find out about a major breakthrough in the treatment of motor neuron disease. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
And welcome back. It's 7:18 here on GB News. This is the Neil Oliver Show, and I'm Liam Halligan, standing in for Neil, who sends greetings from Bonnie, Scotland. Now, scientists believe a new drug could be a turning point in the way they treat people who suffer from motor neurone disease. Clinical trials have shown that tofersen can slow and reduce the progression of the disease. Patients who took part in the trial reported they had better mobility and better lung function. To discuss this breakthrough, I'm joined by Nanette Meller, who's the CEO of the Brain Charity, and Danny Baird, who suffers from motor neurone disease and has been having tofersen injections for the last 5 years. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us here on GB News. Danny, let's talk to you first. Now, motor neurone disease, it's a fairly rapidly progressing neurological condition. It attacks the nerves that control movement. It affects around 5,000 people across the UK at any one time. How have you felt having these injections of this new tofersen? Have they enhanced your life, Danny?
Well, when I was offered it, it's hope, isn't it, when you've got a disease like this, that maybe they could do something, and they have. And I mean, it's 5 years of commitment to have. They're lumbar punctures, so it's 5 years of commitment to have them. So, yeah, I felt hopeful.
You must be in touch with other people with your condition, Danny. Are you?
Yeah.
Is this quite widespread, the new use of this new drug, or are these trials quite restricted?
No, I'll say the only people that are benefiting from this drug are people with a certain gene, because my MND is genetic. So the only people that are going to benefit are the people who've got the SOD1 gene, I'm afraid. And that's not actually very many. It's like 2% of all the people with MND. So,
and Nanette Meller, you're CEO of the Brain Charity, as I said. Do you think this is a serious breakthrough, this new drug? And where does the drug come from?
I do think the breakthrough is something to really be celebrated. And, you know, it's absolutely right that it will only have an impact on quite a small number of people who have MND. But I think the science that was used and the results that come back, because they've been really positive, they can then use those techniques to go on and develop, you know, different types of therapies and drugs for people with MND. So I do think it's a really positive thing. In terms of where it comes from, it's been created by a firm called Biogen, and essentially what it does is there are several genes which are which contribute to MND, and this particular trial basically gave drug therapy to target one specific gene, and the gene that it's targeted is the SOD1 gene, and that gene normally is responsible for breaking down toxins within the brain that go on to damage motor neuron cells, which are those cells that are responsible for helping us to walk and talk, move our muscles, and it's been really effective in stopping the damage that happens when you have that that gene that's faulty. So I think it is a really, really, really brilliant breakthrough, for a condition which for a lot of people is absolutely dreadful. And, I think it really gives an awful lot of hope.
Danny, tell us about how lockdown was for you. Many people with mobility challenges did feel isolated during lockdown. And in particular, Danny, were you still able to get your tofersen injections? How often do you have them?
Do I press this? No, that will just mute you.
Can you hear me, Danny? Danny, I was asking if you can hear me, how often you have your tofersen injections and were you still able to get them during lockdown?
Just keep sitting there looking pretty.
I think Danny's having a few communication issues there. Nanette, do you know how often these tofersen injections are and the extent to which this drug, which clearly has enhanced Danny's life, is available? Can people get it on the NHS? Is there a waiting list?
Hi, yes. In terms of the waiting lists, at the moment, these drugs, they are going through trial processes, so not readily available for everybody at the moment. And I think in terms of how often they happen, I don't know exactly how often they happen, but I do know that people who were on the trial took the drugs for 12 months. So yeah, I think it will now lead on to a much bigger trial potentially, and then hopefully it will be available to people much more readily.
Danny, I think we've got you back now. I think we've re-established communication with you. I was asking how lockdown was for you, because for many people with mobility challenges, it was a tough period. And were you still able to get access to your tofersen injections during lockdown, Danny?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
I certainly will. How was lockdown for you, Danny? A lot of us are concerned that during the pandemic, people with mobility challenges felt even more isolated than normal.
No, mine was fine because our trials carried on as normal. So I was never worried about not getting the tofersen. And I went to Sheffield every 4 weeks to have a lumbar puncture. So they were marvellous. So it carried on.
I must say, you really do. MMD is obviously a really tough condition to have. You do seem pretty upbeat. You do come across as if this drug has really seriously enhanced your life, Danny. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, it hasn't cured me, but the fact is it stabilised me, and I really think I haven't got it all worse since I've been on it for 5 years. So it's doing something for me. And I am a positive person, so, you just got to accept these things.
You clearly are a very, very positive person. And to somebody who isn't by any means an expert in medicine, I do know that motor neuron disease tends to be quite a rapidly progressing disease in some people.
It is, yeah.
The fact that you're sitting here talking to me saying that your condition has been pretty stable for the last 5 years, that sounds like a real result, Danny.
Oh, it is a result, definitely a result. And everybody else in the trial that I've spoken to feels the same. They've stabilised. I don't know how many people on the trial, but I think there was about 11 of us.
That's astonishing. And Nanette Meller, CEO of the Brain Charity, when you're suffering from a condition, a degenerative condition, with all respect, that Danny is suffering from, the idea of a drug, a treatment that can contain the condition, can stop it from undermining your quality of life more, that gives you hope, that gives you mental strength, that gives you the ability to really sustain a decent life, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And I think, for anybody affected by a condition like motor neuron disease, it obviously it is going to, really attack you physically. But of course, for those living with it, they have to also cope with the anxiety and the depression that it brings. So to be given a drug which halts the progress of it, and obviously it's very new still, and there's a lot more information that the scientists need, but to listen to somebody say that in 5 years that, their MND hasn't progressed, I mean, it's something that, I really wouldn't have ever expected to have happened this fast. I know that there's an awful lot of research going on at the moment on the brain, but it's such a complicated organ that we really are a very, very long way from understanding how it works. So, the idea that our scientists can now identify the specific genes that are causing the problem and then introduce a drug which either gets rid of those genes, turns them off, or alters them in some way is absolutely fascinating and such good news for so many people.
Finally, let's go back to you, Danny. It's only right that you have the last word. Just in a nutshell, can you sum up your feelings about the people who developed tofersen, the people who administer the tofersen to you, the people who have been helping you with your treatment? What's your message to them?
Well, I was 5 years in Sheffield at the research centre, and they were just amazing. And it's Professor McDermott up there was the leader or the head of the trial. And now I'm going to London. But everybody is just fantastic. So I have no complaints. But because it's hard, it's hard having this awful disease. So it does limit your life. I mean, I can't walk. There's so much I can't do now that I used to be able to do, but that's not progression in a way. It's because, probably because I'm getting old. I don't know. But, yeah.
Danny,
no, I think
let me say that you've said that the people who have treated you are fantastic. I think I can confidently convey from GB News viewers and listeners that you are fantastic, Danny Baird. Oh. The spirit that you're showing and the determination that you're showing is incredibly uplifting, and I wish you all the best. And thank you also to Nanette Miller, the CEO of the Brain Charity. Really, really good to talk to both of you. I'm just going to ask my panel now to respond to that incredibly uplifting piece of television, I think. Justin Urquhart-Stewart is still with us, but we're joined now by Andrew Eborn. Great to have you
Lovely
with us.
You
don't look like Victoria Scholar, but
I'm so sorry. I came in, but I did get the message about the ties to match our eyes, is what I was told, so it looked brilliant. It's a great story, because the statistics for MND are terrible. Yeah. A third of people die in the first year, and half...
I didn't want to mention that when we had Danny on.
The good news, however, is that Stephen Hawking, famously, he was diagnosed at 21, but he survived to 76.
And what a life he had.
And what a phenomenal life. The more we look at these things and shine a spotlight, the more we're finding some great news. And they very recently talked about the human genome as well. They found the 100% sequence of that. And what that means is the advances in medicine are going to be tremendous over the next few years. And we've got such bad news about the economy and about wars and so on and so forth. The good news gets hidden a little bit. And we should be screaming from the rooftops about these great advances. So it is a message of hope. In the same way as your wonderful thing with Frankie Ray, and what glorious sort of moments about those. You need more people like that to shine a spotlight on the good that's happening. What I would like to do about the 3 Peaks Challenge, however, I would make sure it's 4 peaks, because we're not currently including Northern Ireland.
We're not.
Isn't that scandalous? So, and what is it? It's 850 metres, I think it is. There's one in Northern Ireland, which should be added to that as well to make that make sense.
I'll text the lads now.
Get up there.
And make sure that they...
I'll sponsor that as well.
I'll tell you what, I'll text them when they get to the top of Snowdon, shall I, and say, your work is not done. You better get in a helicopter and cross the RSC.
Sleeve Donna, I think it is. 850 metres we could add to it. It could be good.
There it is. And Justin, these incredible progressions that we make, this tofersen drug, I mean, this is produced by business, by the pharmaceutical business. It sometimes gets a bad rap. It sometimes deserves a bad rap, big pharma and all the rest of it. But without those big pharmaceutical companies, whatever you think about them, we wouldn't have incredible human stories of endeavour and hope and determination, such as we just heard from Danny Baird.
We need the big pharma businesses because actually making money out of it is really very difficult. How long does it take from the day you start to the day you actually get it through and approved? And the answer is most of them don't make it. So you've got to have so many failures to actually then to be able to then make sure you got one that gets through that pays for the rest of them. So well done. And also, actually, on the smaller companies, we're very good at actually for a few focused areas where we've been able to do that. And they need to be able to have more finance heading towards them. And again, that's one of the businesses we should be trying to focus in terms of British investment.
And just on a sort of monetary note, pharmaceuticals, our second biggest export earner, right? It's still a major part of the British economy.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the National Institute of Health have just committed another $600 million into researching the brain as well. So there is good news out there.
Absolutely.
And we should shine a spotlight on that. So there's a message of hope, which I think is fantastic.
Particularly on a Saturday.
Hey, that's what you want, Saturday night.
OK, I'm self-conscious enough trying to stand in for Neil Oliver. I haven't got the cravat. I'm sort of 7 out of 10 on the hair, but I'm not quite there. But this next story is really one that Neil should be covering, but here goes. Now, one of Scotland's largest and most ancient clans, I told you, has reunited for the inauguration of the first Buchanan clan chief for more than 340 years. Earlier today, Mike Buchanan, for it is he was appointed as the true heir and chief of the clan in a ceremony at Cambridgeshire in Callander. And it's the first time the clan, which is more than 5,000 strong across the world, has come together in centuries, as the last Buchanan chief, John, died in 1681 without a male heir. Mike Buchanan, great to have you with us.
Yeah, good to be with you. Yeah.
And are you sitting on some kind of throne or something?
I'm not. I'm sitting on a very plain, ordinary desk, but I do have my standard behind me. So this is my standard there. I'll move back to the middle of the frame.
For people listening already, it's a sort of a rampant lion, isn't it? My God.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I have to ask you this, Mike. I've got a bit of clan envy here. I'm full of Irish blood, as you can tell, with a name like Liam Halligan. Now, Scotland's got about 500 clans. What is it about Scotland that makes the clans so strong? Ireland's got similar weather, similar remote areas, similar battles with the English over the years, perhaps even more so, though the Scots, I know, don't like being pushed around either. Why do you have so many clans? Why have they endured? Why are they such a massive part of your country's superb national identity?
Well, thank you for saying it's a superb national identity, which I totally agree with. I think if we go back before we had a king, the clan chiefs ran the bits of their country, and they were really the power source. There were, I wouldn't say as many as 500. There are now, I think, 150 recognised bigger ones. Something like that, or certainly 150 chiefs. And once upon a time, we were quite big cheeses. We're not anymore, really. We're really sort of figureheads, mostly. We are a source of contact for a lot of Scots who've travelled to the colonies, America, and actually today what we were doing was we were having an inauguration of me as chief, and most of the guests were from Australia and America. A fair number from Scotland, a fair number from England, but mostly from USA and Australia.
Now, just talk us through the ceremony that you went through today, becoming the first Buchanan clan chief since 1681, I think. We can show some pictures of it now for people watching on television. Tell us what happened and tell us how you felt, Mike, as you were. Are you anointed? Are you crowned? Are you appointed? What's the vernacular?
The moment you might see is when 3 eagle feathers in my hat are stuck upon my head. That's as close as the crowning we've got. I don't have a crown as such. What you're seeing here is all my colonial and American friends, and there's a Mexican one there. That's my daughter with a crown, with a coronet, which I don't actually wear. Now, these 2 gentlemen are quite important. The one on the right is Lord Lion of Scotland. He is the man who determines clan and heraldry matters in Scotland, and it was he that I applied to be recognised as the chief of the clan. And he deliberated for a while, and then he said, yes, that's it. The man in the middle of the case is actually the advocate who made the case for me. So between those two, they were pretty instrumental in getting the decision in my favour.
And why now? I mean, it's been 340 years. There wasn't a true heir the last time because the last clan chief died without a male heir. What sparked the inauguration now in particular? Right.
I think we have to cast our mind back to the 1745 rebellion in particular, and the fact that Scotland rebelled several times. We started in about 1697 or something like that, then 1715, 1745. We were rebelling against England repeatedly, and the English got pretty fed up with us, and they stopped people wearing the kilt, playing the pipes, being chieftains. The genealogy continued, but the exercise of the chiefship completely fell into disrepair. So there was no point being a chief. And it might have been quite easy to find a chief a couple of hundred years ago. But with the passage of time, that became more remote. And so, yeah, to get to from the last chief to me, you have to go back 10 generations and then down 20 generations, I think it is. And you get to me. Why did it happen now? Well, actually, there's a little story, if I've got a minute to tell.
Go on, then.
My father, you're supposed to rematriculate arms every generation or two. And my father spoke to the Lord Lion of the day and said, I'd quite like to rematriculate my arms, because my ancestors before that had done this. And the Lord Lion of the day said, why bother matriculating arms as a member of the clan, as a branch of the clan? Why don't you matriculate arms as the chief of the clan? And my father didn't do it. I told this story to my wife when we got married, and she said, well, there's no point telling this story to your children and your grandchildren. If we're going to go for it, we want to go for it now. And that's what we did. We employed a genealogist. We spent about 12 years researching it, because although we knew the direct link, there were lots and lots of potential senior claimants that we had to disprove, showed that they'd either died out or changed their names or whatever. And the dossier was quite a substantial document. And it was actually presented to the Lord Lion in 2018 or 17. He made his decision in 18, but we've not managed to get round to an inauguration because of basically COVID. Now we're having it.
Well, Mike, I must say, you've got the air of a clan chief, and now you are a clan chief. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Many congratulations and best wishes to the entire Buchanan clan, wherever they may be. Mike Buchanan there, the first chief of the Buchanan clan in 340 years, and I've never felt more that I should apologise for not being Neil Oliver in my life. Andrew, what an amazing story!
The active prescription is what they were talking about in 1740s.
Did I style it out okay?
Oh, you were brilliant. I was convinced.
A plastic paddy with some hair pretending to be Neil Oliver.
Well, Neil's going to be in the plastic paddy next week, so that'll work out brilliant. What I love, I looked at their website to see the wonderful things they're going to be doing. They've been tossing cabers. Yeah. Tonight we're going off to do a ceilidh, which is fantastic. What I loved in the small print, it said, bring your own bottle, which I
that's Scotland, that's what you do.
Yes, with the S on the end. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. At home, I've actually got a real claymore that was actually used by the family at Culloden.
Right.
Interesting, because apparently he was killed. So how the claymore came back on its own is all a slight question, mystery. Yes. So, but you go along with the story. But also, a lot of the clans, of course, actually, you look at it, they were fighting for both sides. Why? Because you're Scottish. You well, just pick
They're
one
canny,
side.
they're canny, they're canny,
You know
they're
who's going to win this one. So certainly rather wary.
The picture that for me really spoke 1,000 words was in the wonderful procession with the people in their Buchanan kilts, but holding the flags of Australia, of Canada. Italy was there.
All over the place.
The clan system now, it's about holding a diaspora together, isn't it? The Scottish diaspora, like the Irish diaspora, hugely powerful, hugely engaged with their cultural identity, even more abroad sometimes than when they're actually back in Scotland. And why not use the clan system to enhance that? It's good for business, it's good for culture.
It's good, very, very good promotion. After all, we come from a country where men are men and sheep are nervous.
Oh, look at you!
That is a Saturday evening comment.
He's here
Andrew Eborn, can you top that?
I wouldn't dare would offend even more people, but at least you shifted. At least you shifted nationalities for that particular joke, which is good. What I love as well, is that probably very few Scotch accents. As you said, they all came from around the world. I wasn't quite sure where he came from. Well, do you think he's in the heart of
South London, wasn't it?
Probably was South London. But they were formed, he didn't talk about this, they were formed near Loch Lomond.
Yeah, that's right.
52 miles from Edinburgh.
Amazing.
A glorious story. And the sort of stuff, and the stuff that they went through, they've got a really colourful kilt and things like that as well. But we were talking outside in the green room with our bring your own bottles as well.
Yeah.
And you've got a history, haven't you, with the clans, and you've got
the Stuart name.
No, the Urquharts.
The Urquharts.
Absolutely.
What kind of the Urquharts? Were they good with money? Were they rabble rousers?
They had red braces and no kilts.
No, it's a rather boring blue and green one. It's just very wildly exciting, I'm afraid. All I do know is they're all buggered off all over the world.
But to the clan, I thought the clans used to fight, though. I was expecting a Jerry Springer moment when he pops up on the...
Well, they got knives down their socks and things like that.
Skin-do.
Little revolvers in the sporrans.
You've got to get the lingo. It's a skin-do, absolutely.
So when I first got married, I was sitting there, all the kits you had to wear to actually go off down the thing. I mean, I could barely walk down there.
Having offended everyone in Scotland and several people from other countries too, I think now we need to bring to a break. Crikey. Neil, I'm so sorry I didn't need to do this to your show. I'm so sorry. After the break, after George Osborne, for it is he, said that Elgin marbles could be returned to Greece, mischievous by the former Chancellor, I'll be joined by a top archaeologist to get their view. Stay with us here on GB News. It's Neil Oliver Live.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 7:46 here on Neil Oliver Live on GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. Now, should the Oldian marbles be returned to Greece. The former Chancellor George Osborne, who's now chairman of the British Museum, among his several other jobs, has said there is a deal to be done with Greece. The Parthenon marbles were taken from Greece to Britain early in the 19th century, and since 1817, they've been in the British Museum. Liz Truss told GB News this week that she does not support loaning the antiquities to Greece, let alone giving them back. To discuss this, I'm joined now by the archaeologist Mario Trabucco della Torretta. Mario, great to have you with us. What's your view? Should the Elgin marbles be given back to Greece? Have the Brits got to give them up?
No, not in my opinion. I think the Prime Minister is quite right in actually saying that we are not interested in giving them back. The former Chancellor, George Osborne, said that there is a deal to be done, but this can be interpreted in many possible ways. And I'm not pretending to talk for him on the interpretation of what he means. What my view is that basically the repatriation request by the Greeks is a bogus claim. And by this, what I mean is that a parliamentary commission looked at the circumstances of our acquisition of the Elgin marbles in 1816, and they were the closest you can get to the actual facts. So even looking at it right now, we wouldn't be able to do any better. But even so, the circumstances are so complex, so articulated, that even the Greeks have decided that a legal challenge is not the way to go, and they dropped it in 2014. So they are the first to recognize that there is no point in saying that the marbles were acquired illegally, and yet they keep saying it, which is something that I find utterly disconcerting. Another of these lies that get spread around in this debate is that Greece had no voice at the time, and obviously they were under occupation by an external force. Now, Greece, and Athens in particular, were an integral part of the Ottoman Empire for 380 years by the time Elgin was there. Now, how long does it take for an occupation to become recognized? It was internationally recognized as a sovereign territory of the Sublime Porte, that is the seat of the Ottoman Sultan. So Lord Elgin got a full authorization. Actually, he got two authorizations, because there's two firmans. One, it was a little bit more limited, allowed them to actually draw and make the molds and the plaster casts, and then they got another one that actually gave them the right to do excavations around the fundamentals of the temple, and to actually take any pieces of stone with inscriptions and figures. And now I'm quoting the Italian text of the only surviving translation of the Firman. Again, they go, but why there is an Italian translation? It doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. First of all, because the Italian was the lingua franca, the common speak of all foreign peoples in the Ottoman Empire at the time. And second of all, we must not forget that the entire equipe of agents of Lord Elgin were actually recruited in Italy. They all spoke Italian. So they needed a document that was made for them, essentially, to tell them what their rights were actually dealing with the soldiers of the voivode, the military commander of the city.
Let me ask you this, Mario, if I may. You've given us some incredible background information there, really, really interesting, and you're clearly very knowledgeable. But just in practical terms, would it damage these very heavy, obviously ancient artefacts? Would it risk damaging them to transport them back to Greece? The British Museum's obviously a world-class museum. It does a great job of looking after them. I think everybody acknowledges that.
I agree.
Is there a risk in the transportation? And I hesitate to say this, but is there concern that they wouldn't be as well looked after in Greece? Or is that an unfair thing to say?
I wouldn't go as far as saying that there is concern about their well-being were they ever to be transported back to Greece. And Greece is now a superpower when it comes to scientific production and the study of ancient Greek civilization. So that I've no concern there. Whatever is kept in the Acropolis Museum now is extremely well looked after, even if I myself don't find the Acropolis Museum a particularly appealing museum, both from an aesthetic and a scientific point of view. I think it's a hugely ideological museum, ideologically charged in the way things are exhibited there. But in any case, there is not concern about their well-being. The concern is, should we take them away from the British Museum in the first place? My answer is no. First of all, because the claim is spurious, as I said. And second of all, because they are part of our identity, just as well as they are of the Greeks. I quote you Isocrates, one of the best and most famous orators of ancient Athens. He said, Greeks are not the ones that share a common blood. Greeks are the ones that share a common culture. And we are all Greeks.
Mario Trabucco della Torretta, we have to leave it there. You are an archaeologist. You're a world authority on the Elgin marbles, and we've much appreciated your contribution this evening here on GB News. Justin and Andrew are still with me just for the last couple of minutes. So basically, the 7th Earl of Elgin, he took the marbles and he brought them back to the UK because he said he got permission from the head of the Ottoman Empire, and the Greeks at the time were under occupation, under the rule of the Ottomans. Are you buying it, Justin?
Well, yeah, frankly, if you start shifting it all back, where do you stop? And you end up actually...
But they were made in Greece, just to be devil's advocate. They're from the Acropolis of Athens.
In which case, I'll get the Stonehenge and send it back to Wales. What stage do you actually say, no, that's enough?
I was there as part of my Mediterranean...
But you were there when they were taken.
I was there.
You're wearing well.
I'm wearing a tough paper round. I was there a few days ago as part of my Mediterranean thing, and I was shown round.
Oh, at the Parthenon?
I was at the Parthenon, and they said to me that they had written to the British Museum and said they would look ideal next to the Aegean Sea, and apparently the British Museum wrote back and said, yes, and that's why we've painted the wall blue. So they wrote the ongoing spat is a bit...
That's banter, isn't it?
A little bit of banter, but you're right, it's so politically charged. But they have all sorts of glorious things. But to Justin's point, if you start looking at that, the whole world is going to be shifting stuff around.
Well, imagine if you start... We're best will of the world. Do you want to actually shift vital stuff back to Iraq and places like that, which are unstable, and you probably find...
Yeah, but Greece isn't. It's a superpower in terms of looking after these things.
It's a superpower, but then once you start with that, then you end up with other things going to other areas of the world which aren't so stable.
What do you think, Liam? What do you think?
I'm impartial. I can't possibly say what I think. And on that bombshell, Andrew Eborn, thank you so much for being here on Neil Oliver Live. I'm not on Neil Oliver. And Justin Urquhart-Stewart. It's been absolutely fabulous.
My pleasure.
A romp through the events of this week with a bit of Elgin marble flourish to finish. That's all from me for this evening. My thanks to all my guests. Neil will still be away next Saturday, I'm afraid, a well-earned rest. It takes him that long to wash his hair. But the show will be presented by Emily Carver. Thanks for joining me here this evening. I'm Liam Halligan. Next up is the Ministry of Defence.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK's looking dry and clear in the southeast at first on Sunday, but cloudier and windy further northwest. Let's take a look at the details. East and northeast Scotland will have some clear intervals to start the day, but further west it'll be cloudy and very windy, with rain just beginning to arrive from the Atlantic. Northern Ireland will still be dry at this point, although here there'll be a lot of cloud around and a strengthening southerly wind. Cumbria will be fairly cloudy, but elsewhere across the north of England it'll be fine with clear spells, albeit pretty breezy. Patchy cloud and a brisk southerly breeze will affect North Wales. However, it'll be a dry start across the country with some bright spells, and the wind will prevent temperatures dipping too low. Across the Midlands, there'll be some more prolonged clear periods to start the day on Sunday, and as the wind will be a little bit lighter, patches of mist and localised frost are possible. Clear skies and light winds will be the order of the day for East Anglia, but here too the lack of cloud means it'll be a nippy start for many. These clear, fairly calm but rather chilly conditions will also be prevalent across southern counties of England, all courtesy of high pressure sitting nearby maintaining the settled weather. Through Sunday morning, England and Wales will be dry and bright, but wet and windy weather will sweep into much of the northwest. And that's how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, the siren voices calling for more ruinous COVID measures are back. My message to these fanatics is a clear one: just say no. Why is Jimmy Carr being sued in court by his own father? And is Joe Biden risking World War III? Plus, US showbiz news live from Hollywood with Kinsey Schofield. And in my take at 10, as white students in London are banned from Black History Month, let me tell you, racism does not fix racism, and two wrongs don't make a right. See you at 9.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.